So I share a lot of stories of, I mean, I've sat down with white supremacists and talked with them and walked away not, I mean, I'm not upset.
Welcome back to the Talk Midland podcast. My name is Logan Ricchetti with Mata Realty, and today I have a special guest, the Citizen of the Year award winner, and my brand new pal, Erin Patrice.
Hello, yes. Thank you for having me here today. Yeah, I'm excited.
I know, me too. I love your energy. You're so much fun.
Thank you.
All right, so we just met. You just won this award. Tell us about this award. Congratulations.
Yeah, so Midland Daily News does have people write in, and a couple people wrote in, and I guess they decided that, they would honor me with that. I don't know, I was so surprised. I was shocked and, but also honored because, I think that for most people that do work in this community, see it as service, right? Mm-hmm. And so to kind of be recognized for it, because I don't think people realize how much goes into service work. So yeah, it was cool. I'm excited about it.
Well, tell us about your service work. Tell us about the Breaking Bread Village.
Yeah, so the Breaking Bread Village was kind of conceptualized back in 2020. And 2020 for everybody was like a year, right? Yeah. I mean, we had so much stuff going on. This is always my kind of spiel on this is, a pandemic, a whole pandemic we had, the world shut down, so to speak, and it was an election year. We had some social justice stuff going on with George Floyd. Mm-hmm. It was, just everything. It was just a lot of stuff happening at one time, and I think that for us as humans, it was just too much. We're used to dealing with like some hard stuff here and there, but it seemed like a lot of stuff took place all at one time, and it was a lot. And for me, I started seeing people. Like I know a couple that separated, like they stopped being together because of who they voted for president. And so that was disheartening to me to realize that people could not get past the dialogue part. Yeah. Because that's really what it was that when people were trying to convey what they felt and why they felt so passionate about whatever it was. Yes. People just couldn't get past that part of it. And we stopped talking to each other or block people on social media, or said you can't come back for Thanksgiving, right? I mean, people were not invited to Thanksgiving dinner that year because of whatever. And so that's where that idea came from. Just start having conversations in a healthy way and be able to really have an inclusive space. Because like we throw out the word inclusivity and all this stuff and say, I want an inclusive space, but it's only inclusive if you agree with me, think how I think, align with my way of thinking. So we wanted a space where everybody could come.
Why do you think the political discourse has gotten so much worse over the past dozen years?
You know what? It's so much to that, right? Yeah. But for me, I think that the reason why it's gotten so worse is that we have so much access to information. Like people put so much stuff out about everything. It used to be where you just didn't talk about that. Like nobody talked about religion. Like nobody asked who you were voting for. Even if you were a Republican or a Democrat, people just didn't ask. And I think that we've gotten to a space where people are asking and sometimes offering this up without being asked. And people just don't know how to receive it. And it's just hard. And then two, we become very polarized on either end. These extreme ways of thinking that if you are a Republican, then you must think like this, right? If you are a Democrat, then you must think like that. And it's just not true.
I totally agree. I know that I remember when Barack Obama was elected, and that was a very interesting time in our American history. Obviously that was an incredible moment for progress, for, all those different things. And a lot of people didn't care for him, and a lot of people felt he was a savior. And then you can kind of say the same thing about Trump.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There are such extremes, especially with Trump. Maybe even more than Obama. I guess I don't really know, but it just feels to me with Trump that so many people viscerally disliked him, and so many people were so excited by what he brought into the political landscape. I think that created, or at least exacerbated, the already inflaming, temperament of the country, at least at a national level. And so I think the dislikes, the disapprovals, if you will, are so high. And you include that with the pandemic, with all kinds of interpersonal dynamics changing with, the way you communicate with people now online, more you're not seeing people. Everybody's fed up because they're tied into their house.
Yeah.
So much anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an outlet.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree.
And I think you're right. I think back in the old days, you didn't talk about politics.
Yep.
You didn't talk about religion. You didn't share those things as much. Now with social media and just in the landscape overall, it's become not only normal to tell everybody your political leanings and your feelings, but you either align with them or you don't, and your friendships are at stake.
Yes, which is so sad to me. It's so sad because the beauty of it all is that we do think differently. I mean, it's just a natural cause and effect of being a human that we are going to think different. And the fact that people really believe that for us to have this harmonious world is that we all have to think alike, it just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And so it's just never going to happen. So why live in that delusion, right?
Sure.
And just live in what's happening right now, that people think differently, and how can we still navigate? Because I think about people who go to, whatever their religious organization is,
mm-hmm.
Their job, the grocery store, the coffee house. You're going to go there and be around people who think differently than yourself. So you have to learn how to navigate. I mean, I have 4 children. Well, they're adults now, but all 4 of them are so different. They're so different. And if I tried to parent them all the exact same way, it just wouldn't be successful, right? So we have to learn how to take that person individually and appreciate them as they are.
So the Breaking Bread Village,
mm-hmm.
what exactly is that, and how does it help with this problem?
So the Breaking Bread Village is... So let me start with this, because a lot of people think that this is some new idea of mine, right? What I'm doing is not new, right? People have been talking about things forever. This is a way of life for me that I decided to share with others,
mm-hmm.
and invite people in to participate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I mean that this is a natural way that I interact with people. Anybody that knows me knows, especially if they've known me since I was little, I've always been curious. I've always been kind of energetic. I've always wanted to know people. I have always been like that. So this is a really natural way for me to just be myself and get paid for it. I mean, essentially, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, because you think about stuff and say, how can you do something that you enjoy? Right? And yeah, I mean, people have jobs all the time that they don't enjoy. That's not really them. This is who I am, right? And I am essentially bringing myself to other people and inviting them in. So that's kind of what the Breaking Bread Village is, in a sense, is this idea of bringing people who have different ideas,
mm-hmm. different
perspectives, diverse thoughts. So not just diversity. People, we talk about diversity and we see color. Like, that's a lot of us do that.
Yeah, we do. I do.
Yeah. You say diversity, people think you automatically go to color. And for me, diversity is so much broader than that. Right? I could have a panel full of all white men and it still be a diverse panel, right? Mm-hmm. Because of background, experience, religion, right? Whatever it is. And so what we do is we bring all these different people together from different backgrounds, ideas, perspectives, and have conversation. I mean, we've talked about abortion. We've talked about societal expectations, bias and judgment, empathy, tolerance, all of those things, right? And so what I do is I say, okay, I want you, and you. It's usually 7 of us, including myself.
Okay.
And we sit at a table and we talk.
And you do that in front of an audience?
Yeah, it's a live audience. Yeah.
Where? Where does this go
So
down?
typically in Midland, our partnership here, we go at the library.
Cool.
And it's in the auditorium. And so we sit up on the little stage, and then the audience comes in and we invite community in, like, please come in. I would love for more community to come and for us to be able to see civil discourse. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really interesting that, I mean, we've had, so just to give an example, we had Ryan Kelly come. Ryan Kelly, if any, people don't know who he is, he ran for governor as a Republican the last cycle. And it was really interesting that some people were very upset with me that I invited him to come.
Yes. Wait, why is that? Why do people get upset with a differing opinion not even wanting them to hear them out. This drives me nuts.
Me,
You too?
It's frustrating in the sense that I think I'm very clear on what our goal is, right? I think I'm very, very clear that I am truly trying to bring people together from different spaces, right?
So we can learn from each other.
And or just stay who you are. Like stay your piece, because if you don't take in, it's really ultimately up to you. If you want to learn, that's up to you. That's your choice, right? But you have to learn how to at least listen, right? And be able to not have your whole mood or body shift and change because somebody else is coming into a room, right?
Right.
We have to learn how to do that. And because really, essentially, you're giving them control over yourself. If every time they come in or say something, you just get so bent out of shape. But yeah, people were really upset. So and I think with people like him, and I'm saying that very loosely, so I don't want anyone to take that. But I mean, in that type of mindset, people ask me, why do you give them a platform? And I remember when he came on, somebody referred to him as the other, right? They said, I'm so glad that you had, different people here from the Great Lakes Bay region. And then you had that other. And I just remember thinking, anybody knows too, that follow me on social media, I don't go back and forth with people on social media. I just don't. I don't think that's a healthy way to communicate. And so, but I did choose to respond to that. And I said that I will always invite the others, however you want to classify. I will always invite people like that because I feel like I've been an other at times, right? People see me as an other. So I will always do that because that is the premise of what we do. And it was really interesting. I got a lot of feedback from having him on because of his views. And I had to remind some people that he literally kind of reflects and represents a large number of people that live in our community because of how he thinks. A lot of people here think like him. So if we say that he's not welcomed, aren't we essentially saying they're not welcomed?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I have a lot of feelings listening to you. I'll be honest.
No, please.
First of all, Midland is a vast majority white. It's a conservative district, more conservative politically leaning, right? Certainly not all the way, but it is, and it's a little bit of a bubble. I've lived in Jacksonville, Florida. I've lived in Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
I've lived in Connecticut. So I've lived across the East Coast and in several different environments in terms of, nationalities and races and ethnicities, all those different things. I've been on baseball teams with everybody, every color and every shape.
Yeah.
But in Midland, it's very, very... It's just by nature, the demographics here are almost all white, 98, 97%, something like that, right? So as a minority living in Midland, I'm sure that must have been an interesting way to grow up. Certainly, your perspective is probably much different than mine. Would you say that's true?
So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And
wow.
yes.
What was that like?
Moving here?
Well, both. I mean, what was it like in Cincy, and then so you said you've been here for 18 years.
Yep.
So obviously you didn't grow up in Midland, but you spent some time here.
I'm
running the numbers close, right?
So, I mean, Cincinnati is, it's a big city, right? It's a lot of diversity, but Cincinnati is also very segregated in some places.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, so.
In terms of like where people live, you mean?
I mean, you growing up, we knew certain neighborhoods just not to walk into at night. I mean, that was
because
real.
You didn't feel welcome.
Yeah. Maybe not safe, all that good stuff. And but then it also has some parts of it that is very, it's grown a lot. So, but Cincinnati, if you check history, it's a very segregated area, even still. Wow. And not saying that, it's not like, going back to like the 1940s or something like that, but I'm just saying that there are still some spaces that are kind of majority this, majority that.
Yeah.
But I also grew up in a very diverse spaces as well.
You
so
did?
Our schools you go to, and depending on where you went to school, it was pretty diverse. But no, churches were predominantly black I mean, that I went to, you know. But I also saw a lot of diversity. So it's really interesting. I think when I first moved to Midland, I was culture shocked. The opposite way, I guess, you know. I'd never seen a place where it was just all predominantly white. I had never seen that.
Sure.
And so that was different. And then when I first moved here, it snowed for like 15 days straight. So it was like it was just like, you know, it was just a lot. And, you know, the town would shut down at like 8:00 with blinking lights. Just never saw that, you know. So it was a lot of differences that I had to get acclimated to, and it was hard at first.
Was it?
Oh yeah. It was just so quiet, and I just wasn't used to. I'm used to sirens and motion and just, you know, the sound of the city. And so when I first moved here, it was hard just to sleep at night.
Were you successful at making friends and acclimating into the community, or did you struggle back then?
I've always been friendly.
Yeah.
But it was hard to create those relationships at first. Yeah. Well, I was different. I mean, I was different.
Yeah, you're fun.
Yeah, I came in with color and, you know, and so I think I just was different and people did not know how to maybe approach me.
Interesting, yeah.
Even though I feel like I'm very approachable. I talk to everybody, but I think it was still kind of like, you know, I didn't know where I fit in because when I first moved here, I wasn't married. So I didn't fit into like the married bunch.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know. Because no one has ever told me why they didn't invite me in. So I would only be able to assume why it didn't happen. But it was hard at first.
Well, how did that change over time?
You know, for me, I've always been a way maker. I've always been like that. I've never sat and cried about, I mean, not that I haven't cried, but I didn't continue to cry, right? About not being in spaces. I've just never been like that. So I've always been the kind of person that said, you know, if there's not a space for me, then I have to create one, right? I have to just create a space because no man is an island. So I can't live here and not be a part of things, right? So I have to figure out, okay, where do I want to kind of associate myself with, and how do I create a space for myself? So, yeah.
Do you feel like there's racial tension in Midland?
You know what? I think that people, how do I want to say this? Because as you know, people, you know, take things that you say and make them into things. I don't even know if I would use tension as a word. And the reason why is because oftentimes to have some type of tension, you have to have both sides. Yeah. Right? I mean, you know what I mean? You have to kind of, it's almost like a fight, a war. And I think that sometimes we are good at making things look like they are different than what they are, right?
Better or worse?
Either way. Either way. And I will say, because I've lived here for 20 years, I have seen a lot of change here. I've seen a lot of people who wanted to make spaces more inclusive or make spaces where people feel more welcomed. I do believe that. But I also believe that we still have a lot of people who don't even think it exists. Like, oh, no, there's no problems here. You know, and I think that's the part where that's the problem, is that when we think that we don't have problems.
Well, I feel that way. I don't feel like we have a lot of problems, but maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
If you had asked me if there's racial tension in Midland, I'd say no. I never see any.
Yeah.
But then I think you're right too. There's not a lot of diversity, so maybe there's not that much tension.
And I don't know if I would use tension, right?
Yeah,
I don't
maybe
think
it's the wrong word.
No. I don't think that people are out there like, you know, fighting. But I do think that people are not as aware because they don't experience it, right?
I would say there's a lot of political tension.
Yeah, that's true.
A ton.
Yeah.
You know, we had Governor DeSantis came to Midland a few months ago, and a lot of people went to go learn more about him, and there was a bunch of protests.
Yep, I was there.
Were you?
Yeah.
Were you listening or protesting, or hopefully you were listening?
I was listening, actually. Yeah.
Well, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
And you know, I went to see Ron Paul one time, I've gone to see Democrats and Republicans. I am in the camp that you are in, which is I want to learn more. Also, I don't live and die by the color of the political party, but I am disappointed. I'll be honest with you. I'm very disappointed in both sides of the aisle in Midland not listening enough.
Yeah.
And that's one thing to protest. It's one thing to disagree, but when you're trying to shut down dissent, you're completely missing the point, right?
Yeah.
And there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no political party that's better than the other. These are opinions, these are philosophies, these are way of lives that you feel and I feel and we all feel that our country and our community should be led in terms of those sets of morals. But to shut down the opposition to me is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Yeah, I always tell people that if one person's voice could be silenced, yours can too.
Yes.
Right? And so I think about that when I deal with people, and I get in trouble sometimes because I am open to hearing from people. Because for me, I am so confident in where I stand that I don't feel threatened. And not that other people do. I'm just saying for myself, I don't feel threatened after sitting with someone for 10 minutes and listening to them that it's going to just totally change my way of thinking, right? But I may learn something where I'm like, oh, I never thought of it that way, right? So I share a lot of stories of, I mean, I've sat down with white supremacists and talked with them and walked away I'm not upset, right? I spoke to one gentleman, and I share this story sometime in my presentations that we were talking, and of course he was a little leery at first speaking with me because he wasn't sure of my agenda, because everybody has these agendas, right? And I try to tell people, no, I really just want to talk to you. I really do want to understand, because I'm a big supporter of a why and a how, right? Understanding that, like, why does a person feel like that? It has to be a reason. We all have background experience that leads us on this journey that we're on in life, right? And so I sat with this gentleman, and he was kind of, like I said, leery. And I think he realized over time as we were talking that, wow, she actually just wants to sit here and talk, and I wanted to know, like, help me understand. And he shared with me that he was bullied growing up, right? He lived in Saginaw, and he happened to be one of very few white children in that area, and he was bullied a lot, and like every day, like most people that bully like to do it a lot, right? And it's tormenting, and children don't get a choice to like not go to school and all that stuff, so they have to deal with it. And anyway, as he was talking, I looked at him and I said, so I'm assuming your bullies look like me, right? They kind of favored me. And he said yes. Yeah. And in that moment, again, I would never, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm promoting generalization of anybody, but in that moment, I understood where his disdain came from, how he was taught to hate based on what people did to him. Right. And he carried that with him, right? Instead of maybe healing or growing from that, he carried that. And that's why he felt how he felt, because the people that treated him a certain way happened to look like me. And so for me, my goal in life is to just represent myself in a way where people feel safe, right? They feel comfortable with me. That maybe as he walks away, he could at least say one person that happened to look like me treating him with respect, some empathy and compassion in that moment, right? Would it change his life or his way of thinking? I have no idea. And it's really that's not my business, right? It's not my concern if it changed him forever. That's totally up to him on how he chooses to walk through life. But we are responsible for our interactions with people and how we treat people. And when I talked to him, it really gave me some insight on, wow, okay. And I'm not saying everybody that feels like that, there's a reason why. Some people just feel how they feel. But in that moment, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense, So, yeah.
I think racial bias from every angle is a real thing.
Oh, sure.
You hear the term, the white privilege term, and that's a inflammatory term for all different races. Everybody has a different perspective on that. There are many people who feel that is a very real phenomenon. And it's a very real dynamic in the society. And then there are people on the other side that feel very offended by that. You've seen those perspectives as well. Yeah. Well, I don't have any white privilege. I had to work or this or that. And I have my feelings too. I'm just like I'm sure you do, but that concept needs to be understood a little bit more, I think, from all perspectives, both from the minority perspective and from the people who have that, that title associated with them. And it's tough. It's very tough. I'm curious.
Why is it tough?
Why is it tough? Well,
Yeah. I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah,
no,
no,
I'm kidding,
that's
no,
great.
I'm just curious on why is it tough? I'm just, yeah.
Well, I think that objectively speaking, there's no question that in the history of the United States, the African American community has been at a severe disadvantage by nature. Okay, slavery and just the political or the hierarchy of all those different things. I don't articulate this really well, so bear with me. But
none of us, we're all trying to figure this thing out. So yeah,
there's no doubt that when you come from a slavery track to a freedom track to those people that went through that did not have the same levels of education. They didn't have the same levels of access. They didn't have any of that stuff. And by nature, how could they? Because they were slaves and they were masters and all those different things. And over time, those injustices have shifted, I believe, and I think you would agree, in the right direction. But of course, everybody who comes from that culture, their perspective is it's not enough, it's not fast enough, it's still not a level playing field, it's not fair, it's not equal, it's not all these things. And I don't think that you could argue that that's wrong. I think that's true. I mean, how
and not
could it be?
everyone doesn't feel like that.
That's
also,
the difference.
Yeah.
So you look at somebody like me. Okay, my grandparents came from Italy. I had nothing to do with slavery. The history of and I think a lot of white people feel this way. Hopefully, I'm not offending anybody, but
I hope none of us are.
well, maybe we are, but we're having fun. And at least we're pals now. So if we get thrown out and canceled, then whatever. A lot of white people don't agree with the concept of white privilege because they feel they were not beneficiaries of it, even though maybe other people disagree. But, there was no slavery in my background, at least 3 generations deep, because my grandparents were Italian. They came over on the boat. They started. Now, there's arguments to be made. Well, they had, and Italians weren't exactly well treated coming up.
No, yeah, there's some history there too.
There's history on every culture.
Yeah.
The African American culture, objectively speaking, had it the worst because they started from the lowest of that range, if you will. I think in 2024, that's where some white people get upset when they are labeled with the white privilege label because they feel, and rightly so, I think, that they've worked their way to where they got. Now, I don't know of an experience that I've had in 40 years where I explicitly benefited over an African American person in any situation. But I'm sure that African American people, or at least some, would disagree with that. Help me to understand an example of where I benefited. Now, I know there's benefits. I know there are. I know there's all kinds of, white people maybe get into school differently or they're more apt to get a job. Part of the problem, I think, before I stop, part of the problem, I think, is that I haven't experienced that on the offside, like the gentleman you were talking about, being bullied or being, I have felt left out before once in Memphis.
Okay.
My partner and I at the time went to dinner at Applebee's, and we were the only white people in the room, and we were ignored the whole time. And I remember thinking, we were laughing about it because we just thought it was funny, but holy cow, this is how people felt in the South. This is not a good way to feel.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. Yeah.
This is like 15 years ago now, but you see, I still remember it.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that an African-American person, every one of them has gone through that to some extent. So maybe that's why they feel differently than I feel, because I haven't gone through it.
I mean, I think that's with everything.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's with everything. Think about, let's just talk about the war that's happening, right? We do not wake up and hear bombs outside, right? We don't have to worry so much about, a bulldozer coming down or a tank coming down the road and like literally demolishing where we're living, right? We don't deal with that. So although we can have empathy and compassion for people that are experiencing that, it doesn't hit us the same way because we don't experience it.
Yes.
And that's with everything. And that's why, and even just to kind of piggyback to the work that we do, even in what you were saying, all Black people don't even agree with that, right?
Sure.
All white people don't believe that there's no privilege, right? You have some white people that probably will speak up about it more than some Black people. So we all have these spectrums that we're in. And again, we try to place people in these pockets. Yeah. And everybody is not in those pockets.
I just did that.
You did?
Yeah.
We do that. I think we naturally we try to place things in places.
Yeah.
If that makes sense,
Generalize, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we just do that, and we have to remove ourselves from that type of thinking and approach it in a different way. Because when we start to think that, oh, well, all of them must feel like that, when we approach that person, we assume they feel that.
Yep.
We assume they're thinking a certain way about us
Yep.
because of whatever.
I just did all that.
It happens,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where it's like, well, I don't want to say anything to her because she probably won't agree with me.
Sure.
Right? We do that. And so that's part of the reason why, even with our panel discussion, and I hate calling them panels because that I say that for lack of something else, but really I call them guests that are invited to the table, right? We have this beautiful table we lay out and, invite people in. Because when you hear a panel, it sounds kind of dry to me anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't think that ours are like that. I think that we invoke a lot of different type of feelings in some panels. And it's nothing against panels, but I'm just saying for us. But my point in saying is that's why we don't talk about like bios and where a person is coming from, what school they went to. Sometimes when you know there's going to be a talk, they have this whole layout of who this person is, and they have, they went to this school and they're the doctor of this and they're DEI this, and it's like, as soon as you see that, you're going to form an opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
People form opinions about me all the time just based on how I look, which is whatever. We all do that with each other, right?
Yeah.
We all do that with each other.
Yeah.
Oh, he's good stuffy, or oh, she's this, or whatever. But to try to eliminate some of that, we don't talk about that because who cares?
How does this work? People buy a ticket to
it's all free.
Oh, it's free.
It's all free. It's all that was another barrier we wanted to eliminate. Is so we have partners. The Midland Area Community Foundation partner with us for the ones here in Midland.
Sponsor.
Yes, and then I like to call us partners.
Yeah,
because
sure.
we're in this together. But then in Bay City we have the Bay Area Community Foundation who have sponsored or partnered with us there to put it on there. So it's really good. So it's free. Eliminate that barrier so people can't say, oh, I don't have the money, I can't come, right? And then also just open it for everybody to come and partake. And there is a portion where the audience is able to talk to and ask some questions.
Are these events publicized? Are they recorded?
Yep. So we try to do some heavy marketing for it, and then we record while we're there, and then we put it out about a month later for people to see.
Where can people
on YouTube.
watch? YouTube,
on our Facebook page, on our website. We also have them on there too. Yep. So
this is a heavy conversation.
It's fun. This kind of stuff is so fun to me. I mean, I love learning people, right? And I think that the more we talk, we're better able to understand, right, each other.
Well, I'm having fun talking to you, but in my mind, I'm worried about what people are going to think about what we say.
You know what? And honestly, people may be surprised because I don't really talk about this a lot. And I'm gonna tell you why. Is because I don't. I want everybody to feel welcome when they come.
Yeah.
So I don't want people to feel like, oh, she's really thinking this, because I'm a very open person. Like, people that know me know I'm very open, and I believe in balance, right? We have to have balance in life. We can't just be so extreme on this end and so extreme. Oh, I'm tearing up the stuff. So I talk with my hands. So extreme on either ends, right? So don't be afraid, because this is real, and it's a lot of people who think exactly what you just said, right? And we have to learn to have this open dialogue, because it is a thing. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about pretty privilege. That's a real thing. Pretty privilege is a real thing.
What's that? When you're prettier, you do better? Or you get more opportunity?
People treat you better. Let's be honest. I mean, so I am a person that I watch crime shows all the time. And I always hear officers say, I can't believe they did that to that pretty girl.
Yeah.
And it's like this passion behind it. And I always think to myself, well, if you thought she was ugly, would you care as much? Not saying they wouldn't. Yep. It's just a thing, right? Let's be honest. You go out somewhere, people who go to clubs, they see a pretty girl, they want to buy her a drink. The girl that they don't think is pretty based on society standards, she may not get a drink offered to her. I mean, it's a real thing, right? I mean, I've worked in corporate America. I've seen it all, right? Where people may treat you a little bit nicer if they think that you're attractive, or if they think you have a good personality and like if you mix those two together, you may have a win, right?
Yeah.
So it's a real thing. Pretty privilege is a real thing. And whenever I talk about privilege, I always like to just throw this out there that we all have privileges in different ways.
I like that concept.
It's the truth. I mean, it's the truth. And
Absolutely.
I know some people don't like that I say that because they feel like I'm taking away from what you just said.
Yep.
But anywhere you go, somebody is going to have a privilege over the other. That's a real thing.
There's tall privilege.
It is. It is. You know, I mean, I'm at the grocery store all the time and
I can't
little
dunk.
ladies are asking me, yes. Or this idea that these assumptions that people make about you based on how we look, right? There's different privileges and hierarchies and all parts of society.
So what does that mean? How do you reconcile that? I mean, it is what it is, right?
We are human beings.
Yeah.
And we are going to continually evolve.
Yes.
And some of us evolve at different
Taller
speeds.
than others and prettier and different colors.
It's a real thing. I mean, I really had that conversation the other day because I'm like, that's a real thing, you know?
I have a different question.
Sure.
Your children, did they grow up in Midland?
They did.
How do they feel about Midland and about, how do they feel in general in terms of how they grew up and their inclusions? Did they suffer any feelings of not being included, or is that something that their generation, are we moving past these things, or is it still a prevalent issue?
I think that they experienced pockets of stuff, right? I mean, they definitely, and a lot of the stuff that they experienced just by us talking, because of course they may not have shared everything with me, I don't know, right? But some of the stuff we talked about, I mean, they would have things where some of their friends would make jokes, you know, and the jokes can be more hurtful. They're thinking they're jokes, but it's hurtful, right? About hair or things like that. But I don't think that, and I'm speaking for them, just based on what we've talked about, but I don't think that they've necessarily experienced as much as some others may have said because they were athletes and they were good looking.
They had pretty privilege.
I mean, when you are an athlete, people like
easier to make friends.
People like athletes, right?
Yeah.
You form brotherhoods or sisterhoods, or and so they had that. I mean, and my one son, he was in theater. And that's a whole little, community amongst themselves. So I think they found places where people welcomed them in. I mean, like I said, my three of my sons were all athletes, and I mean, people just liked them. And my children also, I would like to add, they do have a friendly personality, right? That helps sometimes for people to like you. You are approachable and kind. But yes, I mean, they experiencing. I remember my son, who is the thespian, he was jogging around in our neighborhood, going over lines. That's his way of going through over lines for a play coming up. And I remember he came home shaking. I was like, and if anybody knows my son, they know he is the less threatening looking child you would. I mean, seriously, if you knew my son, hey Lavelle, anybody that knows him would agree. And I say that to paint a picture is he came home shaking, and I remember saying like, what is wrong? What is going on? And some guy came out of his house and accused him of casing houses, right? And my son didn't even know what that, like, what does that even, like, what do you mean by that? And he said that people were moving here from Saginaw and getting in trouble here. And he never lived in Saginaw, And so that was something that I remember being upset about, quite naturally. And what's very ironic about that is that because I went there to try to figure out like what is happening. My son should feel comfortable jogging through our neighborhood, right? And I went there, and I used to work at the juvenile care center, and I mean, I won't share names or anything, but I went to the house, and the guy who came to the door and said that to my son, his daughter had gotten in trouble for various crimes. And she's white. I mean, they're white, right? And so it's this idea that how do you judge somebody based on their color when, like what's going on, And again, if I paint a picture of my son, you would totally understand what I mean, that he is far from looking threatening or anything like that. So that bothered me quite naturally because that's my child. And that was right in the height of a lot of stuff. It was a lot of stuff happening in the United States at that time. We've had, people get upset about police shootings and things like that. And some difference of opinions with that, right? And it was a lot of stuff happening at that time. So it was kind of like fresh, right? And sensitive. And it was scary because I'm like, well, I don't want my son out. And it was daytime. It wasn't like night, you know? And I'm like, oh my goodness, if people are thinking that, and he's just jogging through, people jog here all the time. That was one thing when I first moved to Midland. I'm like, people jog all the time here. I probably need to jog more, but go ahead.
I just think that's an example of the inherent racial bias that everybody has.
Yeah.
Not just white people.
Yeah.
Every race has, not to minimize it or rationalize it, but whether we want to admit it or not, when we see a white person, a black person, a yellow person, a brown, every time you see somebody, you think something.
No, I agree.
And a lot of people don't want to admit that because they want to deny, that's not me. But it's just human nature. It's not, and I don't think to have a predefined opinion or perspective of every culture, race, size, prettiness level, tallness level, it's just human nature. You can't deny that people have that. I think where we need to do better is we need to be more objective when we need to understand that we have our inherent, conscious, subconscious pieces of data from our life. Like you said, that one guy, he had a bad experience. So that's going to dictate how he forms his brain and everything. But to deny that people have racial bias is foolish because it's just not true. Everybody has it.
Yeah.
But to, what you do with your racial bias is where your character comes in, right?
Well, and that's what I was going to say is that I am a firm believer, and I teach this, that we all prejudge. We all assume.
Prejudice. That's a good word.
Yeah.
Prejudice.
We do.
Prejudge.
Yeah, we do. We all do it.
It's human nature.
It's what happens afterwards.
Yes.
It's if it turns violent, if it turns into harassment, if it turns into, that's when we have issues. That's when, again, you are coming out, right?
I would like to say, I feel, at least in Midland, that the percentage of people like that is very, very low.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it's been my experience that way. I've never heard a disparaging comment about another race in any 15 years in Midland. I've never heard one.
Yeah.
I've never seen one happen. Doesn't mean that they don't happen.
Sure.
But I just, in my little bubble of life of my friends that are all white pretty much, not all of them, but most of them, I remember I had an agent come in one time, interviewed to be an agent at my brokerage, and she said, well, I don't see a lot of diversity here. And I said, well, you don't exactly help with the diversity either, lady. She's like, well, I expect you to commit to more racial and ethnic diversity in your hiring process. I was like, well, okay, certainly. I would, of course, no clients, no agents, no friends, no family. Every race and culture are welcome at our brokerage, just like they should be. It's a commerce thing. But I thought it was so ironic that she was telling me that we didn't have enough diversity. And I said, well, first of all, there's just not a lot of diversity in Midland.
Yeah.
As an employer, I rarely get applications for employment from anybody other than the standard demographic of Midland. Yeah. But I was a little offended by that because it was just kind of funny, No. But there are a lot of people who are very progressive and they're very, like you, I would assume, are very in tune to these disparities, these what do you call them, social injustices, or whatever you call them.
I just want to say that I am one person that always says that I haven't met everybody here in Midland, so I don't try to assign people different thought processes or perspectives. That's why I take time to talk with people, right? And I give people opportunity. I don't try to prejudge them and say, hey, you obviously feel like this, right? I mean, I've gone out. I
just did it again.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Because I always tell people, you would be surprised what people think, right? Because we don't take time to ask. We just assume, assign, and move on, right? You assign people like, okay, they have to think like this based on whatever, and then we move on when really we don't know.
I don't know. I do that all the time.
I mean, I remember... even when we talk about like guns, right? Yeah. And gun reform, and that's a big topic that people talk about. And, I'm surrounded by a lot of people that believe that you can protect your home, right? Should you do it reasonably? Yes. But I remember talking to a gentleman, and he was saying how he was so upset that people were against guns. And I said, well, explain to me why. Explain to me why. I didn't grow up around guns, right? But people around me have guns, and it's like, oh, and I learned how to shoot, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. I mean, and I feel safe knowing how to be able to use it if I need to, right? But I was talking to this gentleman. It was really interesting because I wanted him to explain to me why he was so passionate. And he explained to me when he was younger that someone broke into their house, right? He was a kid. And someone broke in. Some people got hurt in the household. And he remembered seeing his mom cry, right? And as a young man, he felt so helpless that he could not help his mother, right? His dad got hurt. People got hurt, right? But he couldn't do anything. And he said he would never feel that way again.
Yes.
Right? So would I judge him because he wants to protect his home and never feel like that? No. Well, you know what I mean? So I don't know.
I understand that. But here's where it gets tough.
Yes.
Somebody who believes that they have the Second Amendment right to defend themselves and their family from intruders, from self-defense, and also from government tyranny, by the way, that never comes up. People who disagree with that are a threat to people who agree with it, and vice versa. Now, there's one thing to have debates and discourse and disagreement. But when somebody wants to vote to remove a right that somebody else feels that they have, that's very, very passionate, about protecting themselves and their family, this is where it gets very difficult, right?
This goes back to, again, if you're not impacted, let me tell you something really quick. There was a lady, Black woman in Missouri or Milwaukee, Missouri. So that was where all the riots and stuff was happening a couple years ago.
Yep.
She was very adamant, extremely adamant of no guns.
Yeah.
She was one of those people that went out and protest. She formed the protest, okay? And her and I interviewed her. And she explained to me she was always very adamant against that. She was that person you're talking about.
Yeah.
When all that stuff happened that was going on in Milwaukee, I believe, a couple years ago, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, and there was riots on the street where they had people literally coming up and down their street trying to take over their neighborhood. She said there was a man down the street that had his guns. He defended, right? Scared these people off and reclaimed the neighborhood, so to speak, right? Like old school Western, right, movies. She now teaches classes on safe ways to use guns. She does not protest against them. And I'm not telling people what to believe. I'm telling her story is that she saw it, how it could be helpful.
Sure.
In that moment, because she was scared and she felt defenseless, right?
Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And there's
but
the flip
again,
side
I want to say something really quick. It was because it had an impact to her.
Yes.
When it came on her doorstep and she was looking for someone to help defend her, and the person did, she changed her mind. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm everything you said I agree with, and it's interesting because that woman's experience shifted her beliefs. But on the other side of that, when there's a mass shooting and somebody, there's the worst thing in the world. But the reaction to that, both politically and emotionally, is always to try to remove guns. And every time, without exception, there's a drive and a political drive to try to create a new legislation or whatever. The problem is when people don't agree. There's no middle ground there. There's not a lot of middle ground between somebody who says all guns should be removed and somebody who says, hey, we need to be able to defend ourselves. And this is just one of 100 topics. There are some topics that are existential and some that are just social, Another one is the way things are taught in school these days, especially in, for example, in the Midland public schools. There are agendas that are different than they used to be. Some people are huge proponents of those newer agendas, and some people do not agree with those. How do you reconcile that? That's a tough one.
It's tough. I mean, and I try to see both sides of it, right? I try to see, because I truly, I have to believe in my heart that a lot of people who are advocating on one side are coming from an empathy and compassion lens, right?
Yep.
Where they want to support, right, and help people. I really believe that. I really believe a lot of people really think that this is good, right? And then you have people that believe they believe they're doing the same thing. And that's the part that's so interesting about this. And I always tell people is that most people all want to feel, they want to feel healthy, right? They want to feel safe. Everybody want, as far as like healthcare, they want to feel safe and they want love, right? Everybody does. I don't care how much people act like they don't need it or want it, right?
Yeah.
How those things look are different. One person saying, I want to feel safe, safety to them is no guns at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else saying, I want to feel safe is
lots of guns.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where the dialogue comes in, because at the end of the day, you're still going to have people that align with something different than you. It just is what it is. And I think that's the problem. I think we desperately want everybody to just agree with us.
Yes, we do.
And just convince, if I talk to them long enough, I can convince them to feel like, and it just doesn't happen. So when we let go of that part of it, I think we can rest a little bit easier. And I sleep really good at night, because I don't go into I didn't come into this conversation with any expectations of, well, if I talk to him long enough, he probably feels like this, and I'm sure when I leave, he'll feel like that. Mm-hmm. Why? Right?
I did that.
Yeah. Yes. You know what I mean? So it's like, a lot of it is our problem. Yeah. It's not the other person's problem, because no matter what, I know you mentioned the schools and things like that. It's a lot happening around the world, right? Where things are changing. Yes. I mean, I'm not that old, and I've seen things in the last 20 years that have changed quite significantly, right? In just school of thought and just ways of the world. And, I think that we go into these things and say, you know what, I have to convince them all that they're wrong and I'm right. Mm-hmm. And that's our problem, not theirs, right? I go into things with no expectation, that I just want to meet the person, and hopefully we can have, good conversation. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go my way. You're going to go your way. You're going to still think how you feel, but you may see things like, oh, gave me some perspective, and vice versa. I could look at things and say, oh, okay, I should think about that. But if we don't do the work after the dialogue, that's our problem. You know what I mean?
Well, I want to applaud you for moving these conversations forward. And I think the city of Midland, to award you this award, is really special. Oh. Because the city of Midland, just like all across the country, we need more dialogue, we need more inclusive, and we need more rational debate. We need more forums for debate and for perspectives, and we all need to have more empathy. And boy, this was not an easy conversation to have, but it felt good, because at least I felt like you and I could have these conversations and just ripping back the layers of, all the things that are normally you don't want to talk about.
And we didn't tear each other up.
No.
And that's the beauty of it, is that I'm not going to walk away and be like, that guy,
what a jerk. Never buying a house with him.
No, it's like, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. I just don't operate. I really don't operate that way. So, I don't know. It's hard for me to just say, oh, that's a terrible person. I mean, it's some things. I am a person. I watch crime shows all the time, and I'm the person that feels sorry for the guy that just murdered 20 people because they share his story of being abused his whole life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I don't know. So,
I understand.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. Well, thank you. And
I'm not trying to compare you to the
serial killer. God, I'm not that.
I didn't mean to do that like that, but you give it a go ahead.
I love it. I do. I really do. I think it's great. The Breaking Bread Village is where we all need to go. Is there a schedule of events for 2024? Yeah. Where can we go to find that?
Tbbv.org. So T as in Tom, B as in boy, V as in Victor. Yep, .org. Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being on the Talk Midland podcast.
Thank you.